In this video, we are going to talk about, will AI replace coding in 5 years? I'm going to give you my honest opinion as an ex-Amazon engineer who is currently working in the industry. So if you don't know me, my name is Jake, used to work at Amazon as an engineer, and I'm making these videos to share exactly what did work, what didn't work, what I'm actively doing to earn over $100,000 a year as a remote front-end developer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, so I will talk about my current workflow, how I'm currently using AI in my own work, how I see others using AI in their work. I will talk about the opportunity that exists today. So if you're somebody who's a career switcher, if you're somebody who's looking to get into the industry or you're looking to learn, I will share with you the opportunity that's at hand right now. And then I'll talk about the future of coding, right? Is AI actually going to take jobs? How is it going to affect the market? And again, these are just my predictions, right? These may or may not come true, but this is my opinion based on what I've seen so far. Okay, so let's talk about my current workflow, right? Where does AI excel right now, right? So everybody's saying that AI is replacing developers and developers are getting fired. And you see CEOs in the news all the time saying, oh, we're not hiring any more engineers and yada, yada, yada. Right now, it seems like there's a lot of hype around AI. All right. So there's a lot of hype around AI. The mass populace really doesn't know what's going on. So I can tell you right now as an engineer where it is currently affecting my workflow. Here's where it excels. Okay. So nowadays anybody can take a picture, right? If you take a picture of, say, just like a skeleton of a website, right? Just a basic design. You take a basic design and you pass it off to Claude or ChatGPT or, any LLM. It's going to give you some pretty good boilerplate, especially if you're using a text editor like Cursor or something that's got these LLMs integrated into them. You can get some pretty good, decent boilerplate from these LLMs. All right. So that's where it excels right now. So whenever I'm starting, say, a new project, or if I'm starting something completely from scratch, a lot of times I will use the LLM to spit me out a bunch of code from which I can start kind of painting within or drawing within the lines, so to speak, right? It'll kind of give you the outline, after which you can go in and kind of paint with your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own fixes, and so on and so forth. The second place where it really excels, call it tab completing your own ideas, right? So a lot of times when you get to typing it, so I use Cursor personally in my own workflow. It's a IDE. It's a fork of VS Code if you're not aware. When I start writing my code, I know how I'm going to solve a problem. I know what the code is going to look like. And once I start kind of typing out my ideas, it's very good at picking up where I'm going with the code and kind of fleshing out the rest of it to the point where I can just click tab. I can just click tab on my keyboard and it'll get a lot of the ideas down, right? Is it perfect? No. Does it get it probably about 80% of the time? Yes. And it is pretty freaking good at that. But the key point here is, it doesn't always come with these ideas on its own. You as the engineer, you as the architect, you as the director kind of have to have these ideas in the first place, right? And that can't necessarily, it's like you got to have these skills in the first place. It can't just think for you. Somebody has to do the thinking, right? But it does excel if you can provide the right ideas, the right guidance. It's very good at completing those ideas. Now, the third spot where I really see it excel right now is when you're stuck on tricky issues, okay? Maybe you have errors in your code. Maybe you just don't really know what's going on and you've tried a few things and you're just like, man, this problem is crushing me right now. It's very good if you ask hey, I'm stuck on this. Here are the error logs. Here's what I'm seeing. Can you give me some ideas as to what it might be? So maybe you've tried the most frequently, tried solutions or whatever. If you've tried what's worked for you in the past and it's not working, it's very good at giving you maybe alternative ways of thinking that, you didn't necessarily come up with on the spot. And I find that very useful in my own work. If I get stuck on a tricky problem, that's where it's very good at. And I'll even add a fourth, right? If you write tests in your work, so front-end tests, integration tests, back-end tests, unit tests, things like that, it's very good at giving you ideas for tests. And a lot of times it can write pretty good tests. And so all of these things, bullet points here where it excels, it's probably sped me up, 2-3x as a developer. I don't think it's maybe 10 times faster, certainly not, but it removes a lot of the trivialities of coding, right? The needless burden of, little tiny changes and things like that. It's very good at syntax and whatever. All right. So here's where it struggles though. All right. And here's where I think most people don't understand is AI is not yet at the point where it can completely replace developers, right? It's going to spit out code that has errors. Somebody's going to need to fix the errors. Somebody's got to point the AI in the right direction. Somebody's got to kind of be the mind, the director behind this, if you want to call it an agent, right? Somebody's got to kind of control it ultimately at the end of the day because it's not perfect right now. And so where it struggles right now is making changes across several files, across a big code base. Now, Cursor, for example, the text editor, it has something called Composer that will attempt to make changes across several files. And sometimes it gets it right? If it's a simpler code base, if it is a simpler ask, a lot of times it can get it right. Now, where it can struggle, for example, is in a big React project. Let's say you've got a provider way up the component chain. You're trying to pass data down to the bottom and, do a few things with that. Sometimes it can lose context. It can hallucinate. It can create new files that you don't necessarily want to create. And sometimes it's very hard to just control the output of what it is you're trying to get out of it, right? So sometimes making changes across several files or big code base can be very difficult for the AI. Second part is debugging when it gets stuck, okay? It's great at giving you ideas for what's wrong. So like I was saying up here, ideas when you get stuck, tricky issues. It's great at giving you ideas when you get stuck. But where I found it's not as performant is doing the debugging itself on its own, right? So let's say you're debugging an API and something weird, like the API is not giving you the right response or, whatever, I don't know. And it's got several different nested complexities and things like that. It's going to have a hard time kind of figuring that out on its own. A lot of time you'll either have to step through the code manually with a debugger, you'll have to add print statements, whatever, and kind of work through that flow yourself, manually debug, manually test different states to see exactly what's going on. So that's where I've seen where it struggles. The third thing here is bloated code. So this kind of ties up into MVPs and boilerplate section. And I think this will improve over time, to be quite honest. But the main problem with LLMs is they're kind of trained on the corpus of the internet, which means that these LLMs are trained on literally every public line of code that's been written across the internet, essentially. And then every line of code that's being fed back into the LLM as training data. So what that means is, for example, professional code that's been written at Google or Facebook or whatever, that's been approved by senior engineers, people with, decades of experience, that code might be indexed, but a lot of times the other code that's indexed is code that's just been written by beginners or mid-level engineers or what have you, right? That don't necessarily follow the best practices. There's going to be errant class names, there's going to be errant styles, and there's just a little more bloat than you would like, right? And so this isn't too big a deal if you're working on personal projects. This isn't too big a deal if you're working on smaller projects for smaller clients or what have you. But if you're working in a bigger software team with more senior engineers and you're working in a professional setting, this bloated code is not going to fly, right? And you're going to have to trim down the fats and you're going to have to reel it in and make sure you're following best practices or like your code will never get shipped, okay? And so that's an area where I've seen the AI struggle. Now that being said, let's talk about the opportunity that I see with AI right now, okay? So the first is that many developers are still not fully leveraging its capabilities, all right? So I've seen this in the last two places I've been where there's the early adopters of AI, of Cursor, of these kind of AI-powered text editors. And a lot of times they seem to just outpace the other developers that haven't yet integrated AI into their workflow, right? So there's this discrepancy from developers who are stuck in their old ways and maybe moving at, 100% speed. And then there's the developers that kind of adopted AI and now they're moving at 150, 200, 300% speed compared to their old ways, right? And I think the opportunity right now is like you have this whole class of developers that are kind of stuck in their own ways. They have their old habits. They don't, they're not super eager to change because they believe, things are best done the old way and so on and so forth. The reality is AI can make developers a lot faster right now, but a lot of devs are stubborn or what have you and aren't changing. Now, that's kind of a double-edged sword in that, if you're new, if you're somebody switching into the industry, you don't have these bad habits to unlearn. All right, so that's an opportunity for you. You learn from day one, like how to code with AI in your hands. It's kind of like Gen Z was born with, say, their phones in their hands. They're born with a computer in their hands. And all of a sudden, when they're 15, 20 years old, like they're wizards, right? Compared to if you're 30, 40, 50 years old and you didn't necessarily have a computer growing up or a smartphone growing up, it's like, these things don't come as easily to you. So if you're picking coding up like from day one and you have Cursor in your hands, yes, you need to learn the base skills. Yes, you need to learn the first principles, but ultimately you're going to be a lot better 3-5 years because this AI workflow is so ingrained in your mind. It's so ingrained in how you actually work, how you get things done that from day one, you're going to be a lot faster. And now the third bullet point here is that if you're somebody who's new to this, if you're somebody who's just starting to code, like it is going to be so much faster, so much easier to learn how to code because all of a sudden you don't get stuck on the trivialities, right? The syntax, things like that, because the text editor, the AI is so good at correcting those, finding those and correcting those for you that, a missing semicolon and things like that, like all of a sudden don't take you minutes and minutes and, a half hour to to find and debug, right? Whereas in the past, when you're doing it by hands, sometimes it can be very tricky to find issues, especially when you're first starting and you don't know what errors look like and you don't yet have that pattern recognition. All of a sudden, AI takes that out. When you get stuck, you can just ask AI a question. You're like, right? You can ask AI, hey, what don't I know right now with my current skill set that I can learn that's going to make me a lot better? What am I not doing right now that's going to make me a lot faster? You can all of a sudden ask these kind of questions, and it's kind of like you have a 24/7 senior engineer tutor right by your side at all times that's essentially free. I mean, think of how insane that is, right? And some people may hear that and get scared like, oh, it's going to get rid of jobs and whatever else. I see this as a huge opportunity for people not in the industry to learn faster, because all of a sudden you can become junior engineer level, you can become mid engineer level that much quicker if you really put your mind to this, right? If you see the opportunity at hand, this is a massive opportunity, right? So, if you're in this position where you're not necessarily coding, you're not necessarily an engineer, and you're wanting to break into the industry, you're wanting to be a front-end developer, this is your window of opportunity. Don't spoil it, because other developers aren't fully using this. If you come in, you start using this, you can learn faster and you can progress faster. So if you're wanting to break into the industry, start making 6 figures as a remote engineer, this is your opportunity. And by the way, if you want to go at this faster, if you want me to show you exactly how you can do this, I've included a link down below in the description. There's a free training you can watch, shows you exactly how to break into the industry. At the end of the training, you can even book a call with me and I'll discuss one-on-one how you can do this faster. So let's keep going here. Let's talk about the future of coding. Here's the way I see things going, okay? So the big one here is I see coding shifting more from writing to directing. And what do I mean by that? Before, the way coding kind of worked was like the junior engineers, the mid-level engineers, and even some of the senior engineers, they spent a lot of time actually writing code. The more senior you went, you spent more time on architecture. You spent more time on design decision. You spent more time on setting the pattern, so to speak, so that the mid-level engineers could go and actually build a thing, so that they could go and actually write the code. The way I see this happening, the way I see this working is this hierarchy kind of condenses, and the coders who typically were the ones writing the actual lines of code, the juniors, the mids, some of the seniors, right? They move to more of a directing role, all right? And what do I mean by that is once they kind of have the pattern recognition built up, once they have that experience muscle flexed a little bit, like all of a sudden they just start to write their ideas down into the text editor, and the text editor can translate those ideas into functional code. They could translate those ideas into functional patterns that, anybody can go and fill in, right? If it's them, if they're typing quicker, like they can go and do that. If it's the junior engineers that can follow the pattern, they can go and do that. And I see coding shifting from this more of a writing, debugging world to more of a directing, right? And so as long as you have the base skills, as long as you have the first principles of coding, right? The patterns, you understand object-oriented programming, you understand clean code, you understand some of these, base principles, you move to more of a director role. And I see that kind of hierarchy just condensing a bit. The second, I see the market evolving. Okay, so it's no surprise that AI is having an impact on coding. It is having an impact on engineers, but I don't really see that necessarily replacing engineers. What I think happens is it just shifts a bit. Okay, so whereas before there were back-end developers, there were front-end developers, and it was very distinct, like all they do is engineer. I see some of these type people, maybe people that have more of a right brain, creative brain stepping into the field, right? Where you have people that are good at like design, like they can draw a bit and so on and so forth. And now they have the power of these LLMs, the power of this AI behind them. They can actually write some functional code. At minimum, they can draw up some MVPs. At minimum, they can maybe perform at the level of a junior engineer. And the same thing with product managers and what have you. I could see a world where product managers are now expected to quote unquote be able to vibe code and actually demonstrate what it is they're trying to build before they hand things off to engineers who are specialized in actually writing production level code. The third there is just like business people, right? Business people, and this kind of ties in with product managers, but business people being able to vibe code a bit and that being a specific role. It's like, hey, if we're trying to achieve business outcome, if we're trying to drive revenue, if we're trying to cut costs, like let me show you an example of what that might look like. And then we can pass it off to the designers, after which, the engineers can take it and actually make it production quality. Okay, so I see these kind of hybrid roles emerging, and I kind of already see it happening, right? So where people that aren't necessarily engineers are expected to come with their own prototypes via vibe coding or whatever else, right? All of this, I think, leads to the market expanding, right? Tech is becoming more accessible than ever before. And as a result, I think that means two things, right? It means more people are making products, and I think the number of roles is going to expand as a result. It's like everybody wants to make software now because a lot more people can make software, or at least some form of software. It's not going to be professional, it's not going to be the best, but for these reasons, I see the overall market expanding, which is a great sign for you if you're just trying to get into the industry. I think right now tech is growing at least 20% year over year as a kind of meta industry And that's a very strong sign for you that you are getting in the right direction. You're moving in the right direction. If this is something you're considering, it's like, this is going to be around for a while, probably forever. And so I'm personally not too concerned about this going away, about coding going away. Tech is enabling people to do amazing things. Teams can be remotes. Teams can work across different time zones. And really, this is just an incredible opportunity for anybody who's willing to, say, put in the work and, learn the skill of coding, right? So that's the way I see things going. In this video, we talked about, my current workflow, where AI is good, where it's bad. We talked about the opportunity and the future of coding. Now, again, will AI replace coding in 5 years? The TLDR, in my opinion, is no, but it will change the way things look, all right? So thanks for watching the video. Again, my name is Jake. If you are trying to break into the industry, I've got plenty of other videos on this channel. Go watch them. It will help you actually understand how to break into the industry as a remote front-end developer. Now, if you're wanting to go at this faster with somebody in your corner who's going to hold your hands into the industry, you're wanting to make that remote 6 figures, go to frontendfuture.com. I've included a link down below in the description. You can watch the free training, and you can even book in time with me personally. We'll talk through step by step how we can actually get you into the industry faster, right? So again, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content so I can keep producing more for you. And thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.